Hi, everyone. It's Stella Grazant from Work Happier Weekly, where we're here to help you work happier and live better. And today I want to share a personal story about not taking things personally. So many years ago, I think it was 2013, someone told me that I should go on this podcast. And the guy's name was Dave Asprey. And I said, sure, why not? And Dave, at the time, was just getting things rolling. And he was really gaining some traction and popularity for putting butter in coffee. So if you've heard of this trend of putting butter in your coffee and frothing it so that it becomes this really rich, delicious latte, and of uh, eating clean and basically trying to eliminate sugar. This is called the Bulletproof Diet. It's become really popular, and Dave has just become a really popular biohacker. And now he has like one of the top podcasts on iTunes in health. But back then, when I was just getting to know him, I had never heard of him before. And so I went on the podcast, and it was really fun and great. And then afterwards, I was reading the comments, and oh my Lord, some of the comments were not very nice. Some of the comments objectified me sexually. Some of the comments criticized how I was sharing the research. It was devastating. And even though I know you should just not pay attention to trolls and just ignore them, it really bothered me. Like for a whole week, I was conflicted. Maybe I should go on and have a conversation with these guys, maybe help them understand the impact they're making and all this stuff. And I talked to my friend who is in radio, and she said, Stella, this is just part of the deal. Like, get used to it and just ignore it. Meanwhile, from this podcast, I got so many wonderful new customers and so many lovely, warm emails telling me about how people enjoyed the podcast. But because my brain, like everyone else's brain, has a negativity bias, all I could pay attention to were those two or three internet trolls that had something really not nice to share. And so whenever I thought about that podcast experience, I felt ashamed. I felt like I didn't bring my best game, and I didn't feel good about it. So fast forward a few years later, and I was launching the Work Happiness Method. And I really felt like this program would be perfect for Dave's audience because they're really motivated biohacking people who are really interested on how to just live their most optimized life. And I thought, should I like reach out to him and see if I could go back on? And I struggled for months. I really hesitated. I thought, no, he wouldn't want me back on based on what those internet troll guys had to say. Like he probably thinks that like I sucked and whatever. And so this whole dialogue went on in my head for months. And again, that feeling returned in my stomach of like feeling just full of shame of like not having the stuff to be on that podcast. But anyway, I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna email him anyway. And I emailed the producer, and when I emailed her, she was like, yeah, so tell me your story. And I was like, oh, well, I was actually on a few years ago. I don't know if you remember. And the producer at the time, her name was Jackie, said, oh, Stella? She's like, oh my God, we'd love to have you back. You were one of the most downloaded guests or female guests that we had. And I was floored because I spent like a year and a half and change feeling like crap about my experience, feeling like I didn't show up, feeling like I didn't deliver, feeling ashamed of what I did. And then meanwhile, they're like welcoming me back with open arms. And so that was such a beautiful lesson in not taking things personally and to just act anyway. And so what I want you to think about is, where do you feel like maybe you weren't your best, or where do you think, what experience are you thinking about where you are just like wishing you could redo that whole thing? And what I would say is, think about, how you could be better next time, but maybe you weren't actually that bad. And so the problem with taking things personally is that it's usually has nothing really to do with us, and it has more to do with what stuff is going on for this other person. And I could tell, and I knew this in my rational mind, that the people, these internet trolls who were commenting on whether or not I was doable, and I knew it wasn't about me, but still I let it get to me. And it was, even though it took 2 years for me to learn this lesson, I just, I keep referencing it over and over again. And I'm so happy that I actually reached out to Dave over a year and a half ago, or maybe two years ago, to be back on the show. Maybe I'm like losing track of the right timeline. But anyway, I reached back out to Dave a few years ago, and he has a whole new team, and he's blown up. Now you can find his coffee in Whole Foods. He has written so many best-selling books. He just came out with a new book called Game Changers, which is awesome. I'm listening to it on audio right now, and I love it. There's tips on how to be a high performer that he's harnessed from all the leaders he's talked to. It's a fascinating read, so I highly recommend it. So anyway, I reached out like a year and a half ago, and the producer said, "You know what, Stell, we're really we're booked." And because this producer didn't know me, I felt like, oh crap, maybe I'm just not good enough for where Dave is at again. And so I found it so interesting that I was going back to how I felt before. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put in my calendar. She said, reach back out like in the fall. And so I think it was January. And I reached back out. I set it on my calendar in September. And I reached back out. And then we talked. And she said, well, we only have 3 spots left for 2019. And I thought, I'm definitely not going to get it. And then she said, we just signed Tony Robbins up for one of them. And I thought, oh my God, definitely not going to get it. And then we were talking, and she's like, so why don't we just schedule you in? I was like, what? Oh my God. So anyway, I keep learning this lesson, and like beyond like all the goodness of being on Dave's podcast, the lesson of just not taking things personally, of owning what I have to give, it just keeps coming back. So anyway, I just recorded the podcast with Dave on the last Sunday, and it will be coming out. It will be released hopefully on the 31st. So I will keep you guys posted. But it's just really funny how I thought I got the lesson, and then when I didn't get back on the show when I thought I would, I started to take it personally again, like maybe I'm not that good, or maybe, it's not going to work out. And then I got on, and then really funny is we did the podcast. And of course I spent after the podcast, I spent all night, Sunday night, just in my brain, like, oh, I wish I would have mentioned this or that and this. And so I'm happy to report that instead of agonizing for 2 years about feeling like bad, this time around, it only took me like one night to get over it. So sometimes we keep getting the same lessons over and over again because there's still a little bit of work to do. And so I just thought this was a really fun example of how of not taking things personally and of just being at peace and knowing that it's all good. So I hope this is helpful to you in any way it can be. And I will share the podcast with you guys hopefully on the 31st. All right, that's it. Have a great night. Bye.